Many years ago, in the beautiful city of Ibadan, there lived a young girl named Remy. Remy was the last child of her parents, and she had two older sisters named Ireti and Ibukun, who was fondly called IB by everyone. IB and Ireti were both older than their sister Remy with 7 years, so Remy was by far their junior. Their parents, Barrister Femi and Dr. Bisi, were very influential members of the society and so were very busy people. And because of how busy and tight their schedule were, they had sent their daughters, Ibukun and Ireti, to boarding school because they were already in secondary school, while Remy, because she was still in primary school, went to school from their home every day. But Barrister Femi and Dr. Bisi were so busy that they hardly ever saw Remy because they left very early for work before Remy had even woken up and came back home very late as well. And by that time, Remy would be asleep. So Remy was left in the care of nannies and helps at home, and which was why they had sent their two older daughters to boarding school, because they were growing into teenagers and they did not have the time to take very good care of them. But Ibukun and Ireti made their parents very proud. They excelled at school and were doing very well. They also won several awards and actually enjoyed their school. They were glad to be in the boarding house. And each time they came back after school, every year, their mother would shower them with gifts for making them so proud. Ibuku and Ireti had unintentionally set a very high standard for their younger sister, Remy. Remy, on the other hand, was nothing like her sisters. She was not as smart or intelligent as her sisters, but her parents had not noticed yet because they were just too busy. Remy was also not as beautiful as her sisters, whereas her sisters were very beautiful, slim, slender, and very attractive. Remy was fat. Although none of her sisters had ever mocked or ridiculed her, because firstly, they were way older than her and saw her as their baby sister. And besides, they rarely ever saw her because they were in boarding school. But Remy had already started feeling very inferior because her results were poor and she was also fat. And because some of her classmates, particularly Chisom and Linda, made it their life mission to torment her. Each day Remy went to school. When they were all seated in the classroom, Chisom and Linda would throw papers at her, calling her Olodo, Fati Fati Bom Bom. Sometimes, when they saw her eating during lunch break, they would seize her snacks and say, "A fat cow like you does not need to eat anymore. You have eaten the food meant for your next 3 to 4 years." Chisom and Ada would say, as they seize her snacks and run away. And Remy would just simply sit down there crying profusely. She had no one to talk to at home. Her parents were very busy people and her sisters were in boarding school. So Remy kept to herself in her room, eating in her room, and before she knew it, she began to put on more weight. Remy had also grown to hate school because of Chisom and Linda, who bullied her non-stop. The only place that gave her joy was the four corners of her room. A few years later, Ireti and Ibukun had both graduated from secondary school, and as usual, they had graduated with excellent grades and had even gotten admission into the university. Their father, Barrister Femi, was so proud of his daughters. So, as Ireti and Ibukun were leaving secondary school for the university, Remy, on the other hand, had graduated from primary school and was now heading to secondary school. But Remy did not want to go to boarding school. She wondered how miserable her life would be If she went to a boarding school and met people like Chisom and Linda, and now being stuck in a boarding school and have no home to go at the end of the day, Remy did not want to go to a boarding school. So she spoke to her parents one day and said, "Daddy, Mommy, please, I do not want to go to boarding school." Remy said, with tears streaming down her eyes, "Ha, Remy, but the school you're going to is the same school that your sisters went to, and it's a very good school. Your elder sisters went there and enjoyed every bit of their stay there." Barrister Femi replied, looking perplexed, "I know, Dad, but please, I do not want to go there. Can I just go to secondary school from home?" Remy asked, crying. "Oh, please stop that. Your sisters went there, and so you're going there as well. Have you not seen how finely your sisters turned out? Besides, you know how busy your father and I are, and we barely have time. You can't stay at home all day by yourself. You need people to monitor you closely. And I'm sure that boarding house will also do you a lot of good. It will help you shed a little weight at least," Dr. Bisi said sternly. Remy felt so defeated. She wondered why her parents would not just listen to her. So a few weeks later, Remy was bundled off to boarding school against her wishes. And a few days later, Remy had settled in school, and for the first few weeks, everything seemed just fine. Her teachers were so happy to see her, especially because they learned that she was Ibukun and Ireti's younger sister. And they all loved Ibukun and Ireti because they were intelligent and smart and did not give any troubles during their stay in the school. However, a few weeks later, some of Remy's teachers no longer liked her because they realized that she was not as intelligent as her sisters, and they were so disappointed with her. Particularly her maths teacher, Mrs. Ebun, who would look at her and say, "Where were you when God was sharing wisdom to your sisters? How can you be related by blood to Ireti and Iboko? Ha! Wonder shall never end though," Mrs. Ebun would say. And Remy would feel so ashamed of herself and would burst out in tears, weeping and crying uncontrollably. Soon enough, it was not just the teachers that were picking on Remy. Her classmates had joined in picking on her as well. Each time she walked into the class, some girls, Tife and Timi, would scream out loud and say, "Fatima, fat, ugly, and Olodo girl has just walked into the class," and they will all burst out laughing. Tife and Timi had renamed Remy and started calling her Fatima because she was fat. And no one called her by her real name, Remy, again. Instead, they all called her Fatima. Remy was very heartbroken. She hated her life. She had no friends as no one wanted to associate with her for fear that Tife and Timi would also bully them. She was always by herself, crying and weeping. She now even hid to eat food, else she would be bullied. And the only person who she could have reported to and who was supposed to be her guardian was her math teacher, Mrs. Ebon, who hated her simply because she was not as intelligent as her sisters. So literally, Remy was on her own and was very sad, while Timi and Tife continued to play all sorts of silly pranks on her. Sometimes, Timi and Tife would put gum on her seat, and when she sat down, her clothes would be stuck, and the whole class would burst out laughing at her. Her parents never even came to visit her during visiting days. Remy was so miserable. However, one day, Remy was in one corner of the hostel, crying as usual, when a girl named Halima, who was a senior and a prefect at the time and one of the most popular girls in the school, walked up to Remy and said very kindly to her, "Remy, I have noticed how sad you have been since you came to the school, I have also seen how your classmates bully you and how some teachers pick on you because you're not like your sisters. I am so sorry that you have to experience all this, but don't worry. All that is ending today. Today, I am adopting you as my school daughter, Halima said, looking very kindly. Really? You will adopt me as your school daughter? Remy replied in hope, tears and anticipation. Remy was so happy. And from that day, her life changed for the better. She was no longer being bullied by Tife and Timi. She did not know what her school mother had done or what she told them. But she noticed that each time she went to classes, Tife and Timi no longer bothered her. Instead, they were very scared of her and would go and greet her saying, "Good morning, Remy." They had even stopped calling her Fatima. Remy was shocked at the 360-degree change, but was happy regardless. At least now she could enjoy a semblance of peace. Remy was seriously enjoying the perks of having a school mother. She no longer even relied on eating the school food anymore because her school mother pumped her with so much chocolate, biscuit, ice cream, and everything in between. Remy wondered how her school mother was able to sneak in all those contraband items. But Remy did not even care. She was just simply happy that she was no longer being bullied by Timi and Tife. Remy was finally having a good life in boarding school. However, after a while, Remy began to notice some strange things about her school mother. She noticed that Halima would call her alone into a room and try to touch her inappropriately. The first time Halima tried this, Remy was so shocked and appalled and revolted. Halima tried to talk to Remy nicely and convince her to let her touch her. But Remy immediately dashed out of the room. So in the days that followed, Remy tried her best to avoid her school mother as much as possible. She refused even going to her, even when her classmates had come to call her and tell her that her school mother was looking for her. Remy was so scared. However, as the days went by, Remy noticed that Timi and Tife began to bully her again. This time it was worse than before. As a matter of fact, some of her classmates had also joined in bullying her as well. It was as though Halima had told her whole classmates to pick on her and make her life miserable. Remy was back to hiding away from her classmates and crying all the time. After 2 weeks of experiencing all the bullying, Remy could not take it any longer. So she went back to her school mother, crying and said, "I'm sorry. Please, I want to be your school daughter again," Remy said as she broke down in tears. Halima, by this time, had a mischievous grin on her face. She welcomed Remy back with open arms, and from that day onwards, Halima began to molest Remy. Halima would take Remy into an empty room and do whatever she liked with her. Soon, it was no longer just Halima alone. Halima brought some of her other classmates and they would abuse Remy night and day, telling her to do all sorts of inappropriate things. Remy was so frustrated. In short, she was gradually slipping into a state of depression. She was always crying. She preferred when she was being bullied to her current state now. She could no longer even focus on her studies. She was always sad. She had no one to talk to, and she was just simply counting down to when she could go back home. A few weeks later, the term had come to an end. Remy was so happy to go back home. She had packed all her bags, everything that she owned. She left nothing behind. She swore to herself that she was not coming back to this school where she had been physically, emotionally, and sexually violated. She just wanted to leave this horrible school as soon as possible. A few minutes later, a beautiful car pulled over. It was her father's driver. At this point, Remy was more than disappointed. Not only did her parents never visit her during visiting days, now a full school session had come to an end, yet they still could not take out some time to come pick her up from school. When Remy got back home, the maid told her that her parents had both traveled. Her father had traveled outside the city because he had the matter outside jurisdiction, while her mother had traveled out of the country for a conference for medical doctors. Remy was frustrated. She had no one to talk to. Her mother, who she should have spoken to, was abroad. Her holiday was only 3 weeks. But Remy once again reminded herself that she was not going back to that school. She was going to do everything within her power not to return to that school. 1 week after Remy came back home, her parents had come back from their journeys. They were so happy to see Remy, yet did not notice anything different about their daughter. They could not see that the Remy that left their house and the one that came back home was not the same Remy. They could not see that their daughter was broken and sad. They could not see that something had died inside of her, that she was filled with so much pain and that she was hurting. All through the holidays, Remy was still miserable. She needed to talk to someone. She needed to offload. But her parents could not see it. They were barely around. A few days later, the holiday had finally come to an end. Remy had just 3 days to go back to school. One day, she picked up boldness and walked up to her parents and said, "Dad, Mom, please, please, I do not want to go back to that school." Remy said with fear in her eyes and tears streaming down her face, "Remy, Remy, you have started again, no? Do you know how much we pay as school fees in your school? Your school fees is a whopping 3.5 million naira every single term. Do you know how many children would kill to go to your school? It's only the children of the influential, the doctors, lawyers, governors, senators, ministers that can afford to pay that kind of school fees. Besides, your sisters went there and loved it. I understand that you might have some time adjusting to the school, but it is normal. So please, remove this silly idea from your mind because you're going back to that school. You're not going to any other school. You're going back in 3 days." Remy's father, Barrister Femi, replied dismissively, and her mother, Dr. Bisi, nodded her head in full support. They did not even bother to ask why she did not want to go back there. They were only concerned about the prestige of the school and the fact that their 2 older daughters who had studied there enjoyed the school and did very well. Remy, on the other hand, went back to her room feeling very defeated, but determined not to ever go back to that evil school. She had told herself that as far as her 2 legs had left that school premises, she was not going back there. So throughout that day and the next, she started thinking of a way of escape. She needed to do something drastic so that her parents would not take her back there. So after several hours of thinking and coming up with different ideas, she finally came up with the perfect plan. So on the D-Day, when Remy was to go back to school, Remy was all dressed up in her school uniform and ready to leave for school. And in just about 15 minutes before they were actually ready to head out, Remy immediately swallowed some pills she had seen in her mother's room, not knowing what they were. And in less than 5 minutes, she collapsed. Her parents were very shocked and rushed her to the hospital immediately, her mother's hospital. A few hours later, they were able to stabilize her and she was fine and resting on her hospital bed. But from the test results, her mother realized that her daughter had tried to end her own life. Dr. Bisi broke down crying and turned to her husband and said, "Why would Remy want to take her life? Why does she want to kill herself?" Dr. Bisi asked, weeping profusely. Barrister Femi was as shocked as his wife and was clueless. And then they remembered how vehemently Remy was about not going back to the boarding school. So a few hours later, when Remy was feeling a lot better and was discharged, her parents took her back home. And later that night, they called her and spoke to her gently and said, "Remy, Remy, why would you take those drugs? Do you know that you could have died? Do you know how scared we were? Remy, please talk to us. How are you? Is everything okay? Is there something we should know? What is happening?" Dr. Bisi asked, already weeping profusely. "Dad, Mom, I beg you both. I don't want to go back to that school. I don't want to go to boarding school. Even when I came back, I told you that I did not want to go back there. But you people will not listen to me. You will not listen to me. You did not even bother asking me what my reasons were. Mom, Dad, I've been bullied though, right from when I was going to school from under your roof. But you both never noticed it because you were never around. And when you bundled me and shipped me off to boarding school, Mom, I suffered. Oh, I suffered so much. I was abused. I was molested. Even my guardian, Mrs. Ebon that used to give money every time, she hated me. Because in her own words, she said that I was not as intelligent as my sisters. Mommy, my school mother Halima, she did all sorts of things to me. I don't even want to remember it. Mommy, these people dealt with me. They dealt with me. I suffered, Remy said as she broke down in tears and went ahead to give further details. Her parents were very shocked. They realized that they had failed as parents. Barrister Femi in particular was ashamed of himself and then said aloud to himself, "Every day, I represent clients who are assaulted physically or sexually. Yet, I could not protect my own daughter, my own blood." Dr. Bisi too was devastated. She knew that she had failed as a mother. So in the days that followed, Dr. Bisi decided to take a career break and decided that she was no longer going to work anymore. She needed to spend more time with her daughter. So she went ahead and handed over her hospital to someone else to run it. She needed to spend some more time with her daughter. So she enrolled her daughter to see a therapist. And of course, they withdrew her from that useless school and enrolled her in a school close to home. Her father, Barrister Femi, wrote a petition against the school and the whole school was shut down. While the girls, Halima and the other seniors who had violated Remy, were arraigned before a juvenile court. Remy was just simply happy that she was no longer in that school anymore, and that her parents, particularly her mother, was very attentive to her. They spent so much time with her and made her feel loved, heard, and seen. Remy was so happy. She did not even care what happened to her school mother and others who had taken advantage of her. She was just so happy that she now had the love, attention, and care of her parents. Hi besties, your favorite storyteller, Omalicha again. Thank you so much for watching my story to the end. So this story is packed with a lot of valuable lessons. First and foremost, parents, let us decide to do better this year. Yes, we are working, trying to make ends meet and all of that. Very important and well done. But we must also understand that these children are our primary responsibility. So let's take our time to learn how to balance, our family life and our work life. Also, as school resumes, please talk to your children. Find out if they really want to go back to that school. Find out if there's someone physically, emotionally, or even sexually violating them. Please, let us do better this year. Let our children know that we're a safe space and they can talk to us about literally anything. And please do not be too fast, to judge them or to tell them it's their fault that someone touched them in an inappropriate manner. I feel like Dr. BC and Barrister Femi both failed in their parental duty. They compare their younger daughter with their two older daughters. Every child is different. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on this one. What do you think about the whole story? What do you think about Dr. BC and Barrister Femi's parenting style? Do you think that it's their daughter's fault, Remy, that she didn't speak up on time? Please share your thoughts with me in the comment section, and please support your homegirl Omalicha by subscribing to my channel, liking my videos, and sharing it with your loved ones. So now, till I come your way again with more interesting stories, bye.